You're listening to the podcast for all of the news, notes, and breakdowns for your Ohio State Buckeyes. This is Sons of the Shoe with Nick Wilson and Spencer German.
It is Sons of the Shoe. It's Jake Vulinec. It's Spencer German. And we're happy to be here after what was a thrilling victory for the Ohio State Buckeyes last night. I don't know that anybody – there was a lot of people picking the Buckeyes to win. I don't know if anybody picked them to win in as dominant fashion as they did last night with a final score of 41-21. They blow out the Ducks by 20 points. I mean, that's been the best team in football this entire season, Jake. And for them to, put the boots to them, curb stomp, like whatever phrase you want to use, I think blew a lot of people away. I kind of joked at halftime. I don't know what's more surprising, the fact that they were blowing them out by so much. And it was, I think at the time, at halftime, it was 31-8, or the fact that, or I guess it was 34-8, or the fact that Jaden Fielding had made 2 field goals that were like kind of longer range. Like I think he made like a 46-yarder was one of them. Like it was pretty impressive that all of a sudden everything that we thought was wrong with this team has suddenly just gone to a different level. And it speaks to just how the team, I guess, used that Michigan game as a source of motivation. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Ryan Day's future, which I don't think is any more in jeopardy, obviously, and just what all this means for the Buckeyes moving forward. But, Jake, what was your sort of initial takeaway? I know you were kind of working during the game, but you tried to watch as much as you could. Your initial reactions to what was obviously, I would say, the most dominant victory for Ohio State football, maybe over like another Power 5, like top tier program ever. And what was truly a statement by this Ohio State team.
Yeah, my initial reaction was, what in the hell is going on here? What happened? Where's the team that lost to Michigan? Where's the team that couldn't figure out that all they have to do is lob the ball up to Jeremiah Smith and good things happen? Where was that? I'm happy they're gone, but where the hell did it go? Okay, whoever had the Buckeyes to go up 34-0 and the game to start out in a complete rout, I need the script. I absolutely need the script. Okay, my bank account desperately needs the script to go 34 up. Like, that is absolutely absurd. Everything clicked right from the start. Spencer, I tweeted it out, but it's the exact thing that we've talked about practically all season long, right? You were waiting for the Buckeyes to be able to get off to a hot start on both sides of the ball at the same time. It happened against Tennessee and now happening against Oregon. I don't know where they were hiding this entire season, but both sides have came to play right out of the gates when it's mattered most.
Sorry, I think some of this just goes back to, this is the Ohio State team we thought existed, right? Like, and that's what made games like the Michigan game, and even on some level like games like the Nebraska game, so frustrating, was that you knew that they had this in them. You knew that this team was capable of this very thing. Now, I don't know that we thought they'd be able to do this to a team like Oregon. Like I think when you put those two teams on the field together, we both kind of felt they were pretty evenly matched. And I think we saw that play out the first time they played during the regular season. I think it was like week 7, because you saw like great wide receiver talent for both these teams. You saw, 2 defenses that could get stops when necessary. But like what you saw yesterday was a defense that totally dominated the other team's offense, and an offense that was just, at least for the first half, completely unstoppable. And it was like they exuded their will on Oregon. So like that's the thing that I think has been frustrating all year, though, is just, to your point, where was this all year? But I also think what's interesting about this, Jake, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, like where we're at right now, I think it's kind of stupid to go back now and look back and be like, well, where was this all year? Because at this point, who cares? Like, all that matters now is it's here. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, because that'll kind of play into, I think, the Ryan Day future conversation. And obviously that's I think, a massive talking point for a lot of people right now, which we do want to get into. But from the game's standpoint specifically, I can tell you, Jake, like I felt like on the first drive, it took them 3 plays to score. And like first play of the game was like a fake screen pass out to, it might have been Smith or it might have been Ibuka. I can't remember who it was exactly. And then G. Scott, the tight end, like he motioned out and like sort of looped around the screen and was running like a wheel route up the sideline. And the play was literally fake the screen pass to the wide receiver and then find G. Scott sort of like in the middle of the coverage. Like he was too deep for the guys who were playing up near the screen and too shallow for some of like the back end help. And it was just this massive explosive play out of the gate. And I kind of just laughed because I was like, oh my God, like Chip Kelly already in his bag to start this game with a play like that. And then 2 plays later, you want to screen to Jeremiah Smith. And it's the Jeremiah Smith show from there where he's just putting on like that guy is showing you how good he is. And I'm not saying they haven't done stuff like screens with him and stuff in the past, but they moved him around a ton in this game. He was playing in the slot. He was playing outside. He was doing a little bit of everything. And you saw the benefits of like, if you get this guy in space and you get this guy just getting the ball in different situations, he is going to take off and he is going to be able to just Oregon had no answers for him. They had absolutely no answers for him whatsoever on defense, whether it was just trying to cover him downfield, whether it was he was running a screen behind the line of scrimmage and making a man miss and then breaking it for a big gain. He was unbelievable in this game last night. And I mean, I don't know if we can say enough about him. He's probably he is already on par to be like the greatest Buckeye of all time with what he's been able to do in his freshman season. And it's kind of stupid that he has to stay in college 2 more years because that guy, as Dan Lanning even said after the game, he could be an NFL pro tomorrow.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. If the lottery had 3 numbers, you could play 3-digit numbers, I'd be playing 7, 187, and 2 today. Okay, because that is absurd. That's nuts. That shouldn't be a thing. Okay, and 5 of his catches were in the first like 3 drives. I sat there and one of the questions that I had, like just thinking about it, was like, listen, why aren't people just throwing doubles at Jeremiah Smith? Like, I get there's more wide receiver talent. Like Carnell Tate's great. Emeka Ibuka obviously had a really good game himself. But
well, that's the problem is like you just have so much to account for with this Buckeyes offense, which again goes back to the big thing of where was this before? Like, why didn't you realize like, yeah, okay, you're going to double Jeremiah Smith, triple Jeremiah Smith, fine. We'll throw it to Emeka Ibuka and Carnell Tate. Like, they're so talented at the wide receiver. It makes it mind boggling, but you're right. Like, he said it during like the lead up to the game. Like, if you're going to play me man to man, good luck to you. And then he said after the game that no matter what you do, you can't cover him. And I think that was true too, because you saw some bracketed coverage and Will Howard was just willing to throw it up, and he threw some darts again in this game, which we'll talk about. And Jeremiah Smith just kept coming down with it.
The one play, I think it was Jeremiah's 2nd or 3rd catch of the game. He was really triple covered. There's triple cover. There's a safety deep, a corner, and I don't know if it was a linebacker or another corner on top of him. Like, Will Howard just saw him in the middle of the field. He's like, the only jersey I see is Jeremiah Smith. Okay, I'm throwing it up there, and God willing, he'll go catch it. And that's what he did. He literally just lobs it up. Jeremiah Smith goes and gets it. It is one of the most absurd things. He's going to be the best wide receiver, whatever draft class he has to come out of. What does that make it? 2027? Like, he should be hands down the number 1 pick. I don't care who else comes out. This guy is game-changing at every turn. You thought, like, okay, he kind of got locked up at certain points this year, but not really locked up. It was just like they forgot to use him, or
that's
Howard struggled.
At this point, I'm sort of attributing that to less of him getting locked up, because I don't know if there's anybody that could lock him up, at least in college. Like maybe in the NFL level, there'll be corners who are on par with him, right? But I'm just kind of chalk it up to they just weren't utilizing him the way that they've been utilizing him these last 2 games.
Yeah, Spencer, I've been screaming for it. Just lob the ball to him. He's insane. Lob the ball to Jeremiah Smith. Good things happen. It sounds like a stupid plan. That should not work. That should not be an offensive game plan, right? We talk about how brilliant Chip Kelly is. Your game plan should not be lob the ball to Jeremiah Smith, but he's that good. That can be your game plan, like, for entirety of drives. Like, the first drive was literally, okay, I'll be Chip Kelly, gadget play to G. Scott, and then get the ball to Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah.
You overthrew him, missed him one time, and then it was like, well, we can't get it to him down the field. We'll just throw it to him behind the line of scrimmage and then see what he can do.
Well, and it's remarkable what the like, and you said like you've been screaming for this to happen for, you know, the entirety of the season. What's remarkable is like this team has been so focused at times on like establishing the run And their game plan all along should have been this. It should have been, let's get our receivers the ball and use that to help set up the run. Like, instead of using the run to set up the pass, use the pass to set up the run. And that played out similar to the Tennessee game. When you got once they knew they had to focus so much on trying to stop your this offensive attack in the air that could not be stopped, it opened things up for the run game to start doing some things. And you saw some really explosive runs from Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson. Henderson had the 66-yard touchdown run in the second quarter that really, I think, is the one that I felt like put the game away, because it made it 31-0 with 8 minutes to go in the second quarter. And it was like, all right, this game might be a wrap. Like, I know Oregon's offense is good, but the way they're playing today, I just don't know if they're going to be able to dig themselves out of this hole, especially if Ohio State keeps scoring. Like, that felt like a dagger of a score. And it was just, again, it's just, when this offense is rolling like that and their pass game is working as well as it was, it's everything else just kind of flows off of that. I mean, it was remarkable to watch, Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson combined for like 170 something yards in this game. I think 179 yards in this game. Like, everything just works off of that. And I get it, again, like, it's crazy that they didn't tap into that sooner this season, but man, oh man, am I glad that they have now, because this version of the Buckeyes can't be beaten. Like, there's nobody in this field, I think, that can beat the Buckeyes when they're playing like this. And I think this also opens up the can of worms to talk about Will Howard, because he played one of the most efficient games you'll ever see. 17 of 26, 319 yards, 3 touchdowns. Had a couple small mistakes in terms of like missing guys. Some of that was because of pressure, and Oregon was able to generate a little bit of pressure, but they continued to work around this offensive line that obviously has some weaknesses by booting him out, getting him moving, all these different things. I mean, it was another Will Howard performance for the ages, and one that, again, reminds me that if he's playing like that throughout this playoff, this team's unstoppable.
Yeah, he looked great. The offensive line, too. Like, you talked about sort of the gadgety stuff to get Will Howard to sort of out of the pressure. Like, Oregon was one of the best defensive lines in the country, especially when it comes to rushing the passer. They're elite. And with a makeshift offensive line down their top 2 pieces, Ohio State found a way to keep Will Howard for the majority of the game upright. Right? Like, it wasn't perfect. It's never going to be perfect with this offensive line. They're going to give up sacks the way they are right now. It's going to look ugly sometimes, but considering the fears that we had, and Spencer, I got to point to you, the fears that you had. You said if this team wasn't going to win national title, you blamed it on the offensive line, that they would struggle. I think they've played probably 10 times what you would have expected down their top 2 guys.
Yeah, and listen, there's moments where you still see some of the weaknesses. There was a play where Montgomery, who's one of their top recruits from one of their more recent classes, who I'm actually excited about. He's an Ohio kid. I think he's gonna be pretty good. There was a couple of moments where, like, he got blown up. Like, clearly there's some like learning on the fly that's going on with this group, and it's not. I wouldn't say it's their strength, but I think a combination of things, like, they had the couple weeks after the Michigan loss to kind of reconcile and get things, work out some of the kinks there with a younger group that's with these younger guys that have kind of stepped in. I also think, so I think that helped their cause. I also do think that Chip Kelly is, again, the mastermind of a play caller that he is. He's doing things to help alleviate some of the pressure on the offensive line. And that then builds confidence when you have like Will Howard doing what he's doing and lighting it up. And then when they start running the football, like we said, those guys feel confident and like, hey, we can really take over this game and exude our will and be physical and all these different things. So I like, you're seeing in real time this group kind of learn and grow together. And yeah, you're right. Like, you don't have the success you do running the football like they did yesterday without the offensive line playing some version of like really good football. Even if it's not their strength, and you don't have Will Howard doing what he did. I do think Will Howard's a big part of this, because he is getting rid of the ball a lot quicker. He's understanding, I think, like, he's not going to have a ton of time to sit there and just like stand in the pocket and throw all the time. So he's got to get rid of the ball. And he's seeing things so well right now, it's hard to stop. But yeah, like, the offensive line has been a something that I've noticed being not a strength, but But I've clearly noticed that they've come together and played some of their best football in recent weeks, and it's all coming together at the right time. It's I own the fact that I said it was a weakness for them and it could cost them a national championship. I believed that at the time, but I think now we're seeing that they've found ways to alleviate that and find the success that they need to.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, not to divert you off of Will Howard there, but I thought the offensive line deserved a little bit of moment and shining there. Will Howard, by the way, like, yes, he looks really good, but Will Howard, I forget who we were talking to, Spencer. It was when we were on the air hosting together at one point, but they said that Will Howard was not a quarterback that you win because of. It's not that you're winning.
It was Lance Reisland said that last week.
Yes. He's not a quarterback you win because of, but it's not a knock on Will Howard. It's not like you're winning in spite of him either. He's just a quarterback who you expect to make the easy throws.
Doesn't it feel like right now they're winning? Listen, I understand. Like, you have Jeremiah Smith, so yeah, there is still a reason to be like, well, they're winning not because of him, but with him. But don't you think like the way he's playing right now, though, is a testament to like they're also now winning with him, because he's made some incredible throws at like that throw to Emeka Egbuka for the second touchdown. And that was one of his best throws of the season, hands down. I mean, he's doing the things that you need an Ohio State quarterback to do. Yes, the talent raises his level, but I think right now, like, it's not just that they're winning because of him. I think they're winning with him.
Yeah, it's not even. So the big thing with him is that he's making good throws, but a lot of the throws that he makes right now, in my eyes, are just, you are so talented and you have the talent around you. Trust the talent. Like, trust in your arm to go up and make the throw and, put it in a good spot. But at the end of the day, trust that the guy that you're throwing to is just going to come down with it. I think that's what Will Howard's doing. I think that's why he looks so confident. I think they're scheming a lot of things for him to get the ball out quickly, which looks really good. Like, I'm not trying to knock Will Howard. Again, he's playing the best football of his season by far.
I don't know, Jake. You sound like a Will Howard hater to me. I'm
not a Will Howard hater. Definitely not a hater. But, like, I'm not going to, like, also put him on this pedestal thinking that he's the best quarterback in the country. I don't believe that's true either.
No. I mean, I wouldn't go that far. I think there's probably better quarterbacks even in this field. I thought a lot about during this playoff. Like, imagine if Drew Aller was on Ohio State. Like, you'd probably have Quinn Ewers. I think is taking a little bit of a step back. But Drew's been great. There's people saying Dylan Gabriel was maybe the best quarterback, and he had a pretty good game yesterday. All things considered, it's just their offense was kind of stuck in the mud, but. Yeah, no, I'm not there, but I definitely think like he's proving to you like he's not right now. I don't think they're just winning in spite of him. I think they're winning with him because he's playing at such a phenomenal level. Along those lines, let's before we get into the Ryan Day part of this, because that is the biggest part of this conversation. I do think we need to talk about the defense, because another game where they just play lights out football. They show how dominant they are. They call themselves BIA, best in America, to start the season. And that, I think, has come to fruition again, like everything else with this team, at the perfect time. Caleb Downs is still a monster. He's making plays all over the field. Cody Simon deserves a shout-out. He got, like, the defensive MVP award for yesterday. He had a gazillion tackles, it felt like, and it seemed like every play every time there's a big play for the Buckeyes, it seems like he's the one making it. Like, he's sacking the quarterback. He's deflecting the ball. He's been good in coverage. He's been good as a blitzer. He's been good as a tackler. That guy is everywhere. It's no wonder why he's like one of the heart and soul guys of this defense. I mean, it's been fun to watch him play. And then I can't say enough, Jake, about the next level. And I don't know if it was the Michigan game. Maybe the planting the flag like lit some sort of spark for this defensive line, man. Maybe not, because I thought Jack Sawyer was playing a couple good games in a row towards the end of the season anyway. So maybe he just was kind of on this trend anyway. But Jack Sawyer and even JT Tuimoloau, those two have raised their game to another level these last couple games. And this is what you expect from like an Ohio State defensive line. Like it is shades of the Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, Chase Young years, where you have somebody, a pass rusher, that can actually generate pressure on his own and is like getting held, but they're not calling it. Like, he has been fantastic. It seems like every game he's jumping up and deflecting a pass or intercepting a pass, like we saw in the Michigan game. Sawyer, I can't say enough about him. I was hoping to see him take a leap this year. after how he played in the bowl game last year, and he has 100% taken that leap. And if he's playing at that level, man, like, again, another reason why I think this Ohio State team becomes like impossible to beat.
Yeah, the defense is absurd. Like, the way that you got torched by Dylan Gabriel in the first meeting, where he looked like he was unstoppable, they couldn't get pressure, to how it goes in the second meeting now in the college football playoffs. I mean, Spencer, like, we could look at the passing numbers. The big thing to me was like what they did against the run, because Jordan James, when you played him earlier in the season, I think it was like 115 and a touchdown or two. You held him to 7 carries for 14 yards, and yes, he gets hurt, but like, he was going nowhere. There was nothing. He had an 11-yard run and ended the game with 14 total yards. That is absolutely insane. He had no time, no room to get a hole. I mean, he was practically touched the ball, hit by an offensive Ohio State defender. It was ridiculous.
Tyleik Williams deserves a lot of credit for that, because he has been like that run stuffer up the middle. I saw people tweeting about it last night, like people sort of projecting where he should be drafted. I think somebody, I don't know if it was maybe it was Dane Brugler. I might be misrepresenting that completely. Somebody said, I'll have to go back and find the tweet. Somebody said like they're having a hard time putting 32 players ahead of Tyleik Williams when it comes to like a draft board for the first round. Like that's what this time of year is about, right? Like for these players that all came back, they can really elevate their draft status based on how they play in these games against the best teams in college football. Jack Sawyer's doing that. Tyleik Williams is doing that. But you're right, man. Like how they stopped the run. Because there was moments where I was like, is Oregon just like folding? Like they tried so hard to get that run game going because they knew that if they could, that would open so many things up for them. I mean, they were down 24-0 and they were still trying to run the football, and it was just getting stuffed every time. And some of that was Cody Simon flying up and making plays in the backfield. It was, I mean, again, just this defense. You can quote me. You remember, like I was saying for weeks that this defense was national championship level good, and it was the offense that I had questions about. And it finally, you're seeing that defense get like you're seeing the defense get a level of play from the offense that like they equal each other, right? Yeah. And that's what we've been waiting for all year, because that defense has been good, and now I think people are realizing how good it really is because they're finally getting the offense to match it. That's what makes it so fun.
Yeah, it was insane. I mean, I got a couple of weird looks at work, because there's a run play up the middle by Jordan James.
Just salivating over a great run stop on defense, a great defensive line play.
I'm sitting there with customers behind me as I have my back turned staring up at a TV. And I'm just like, come on, Tyleik.
Just getting all revved up about defensive line play at the movie theater. Yeah,
I live for it. You can't stop it.
I love it.
I mean, that's what I eat, sleep, and breathe. Like, I love the trenches. It's everything. Like, as much as this Ohio State team isn't about it, the defense is about it. They look so good in the trenches. Jack Sawyer constantly in the backfield. We talked about Cody Simon. I mean, I could rave on and on and on about the way this defense played. Yeah. And honestly, I attribute a lot of their success to the defensive line. Like, I've had my questions about the secondary. Before the game, Tez Johnson basically laid out the fact, he was like, yeah, Denzel Burke, really good wide receiver. Davison Igbinosun, also not bad, but he's got issues. We're going after that guy.
Yeah. And they took, I think they took one deep shot, and he was in pretty good coverage, didn't get called for a flag, ball deflected off his helmet and went out of bounds. That was like the only time they really challenged him downfield. Some of that, again, was the defensive line was getting pressure. But listen, there was a number of times where Gabriel sort of stood in the pocket and then had to like roll out because of there was a lot of coverage sacks or coverage plays where, you know, Gabriel had to kind of scramble and make something happen because nobody was open. That, again, the defensive line being as good as it was, it was a perfect, like, the defensive line and the secondary were playing in sync with each other, because there was a number of times, and again, you're right, the secondary deserves a lot of credit, where they were just downfield covering these guys for a long period of time, and there was just nowhere to go with the ball, and so Gabriel then had to sort of try to create on his own. Brian Cato, who jumps in and listens to the show, we appreciate you, man. Burke had a great game, he says. I think that's 100% true. You didn't even really hear Burke's name mentioned during the game, which tells you they weren't really throwing his direction because he was playing pretty well. And that, again, I think, I don't know if we underestimated it, but the revenge factor in this game. I think Denzel Burke knew he played poor in that first game. Igbinosun knew he played poor in that first game. Will Howard felt a sense of responsibility for how that game ended with them not, finishing the job. I think Jeremiah Smith, with the push off that he felt like maybe shouldn't have gotten called, like he felt a passion to go out and like prove that he was going to dominate this team. Like all those things played a factor in I think how this team came out and played. And like they're in that Jordan mentality. Every step of the way, it seems like they're creating some source of motivation. For Tennessee, it was, we want to prove that the Michigan game wasn't us. So, unfortunately for Tennessee, they were the first team you had to play after getting after one of the worst losses in program history. So that's how it goes. Oregon was a rematch. I already heard some stuff about Texas. I think Will Howard made a comment about how like Texas is the only team in the Big 12 that he never beat. So like that's a source of motivation for him. Like there's probably going to be a Quinn Ewers storyline here that we'll talk about coming up. We have plenty of time to preview that game. It's over a week away. But yeah, like that I think was something we didn't talk about enough, was just like the motivation of the redemption factor. But I will say this, Jake, I did say on this podcast that the saving grace to not playing in the Big Ten title game and staying at home was that you had a chance to scout that team and not have to throw out some things that maybe you saved against them. And I do think that came to fruition. They saw Penn State go out and play a really good game against Oregon. And they were like, okay, here's some things we can exploit. And that allowed them to sit at home and prep for that game and know we still have all these cards up our sleeve that we haven't used against this team. Let's see if they can stop it this time around. And again, I said, like they always say, like playing a team multiple times, it's hard to beat them twice, whatever. That I can't say, like if they had played if this was the third time they were playing, I would have felt like Oregon had a really good shot at kind of bouncing back if they had lost to Ohio State the second time. I think we underestimated that too. Like the fact that they didn't play in the Big Ten title game and this was just the second time they saw them, that ended up being huge. And in some level, I think it does, as people will probably complain about on social media, it does devalue the conference championship game. But I have a point on that. I'll share it in a little bit, but I want to give you the floor here because I just talked for a while. So yeah. Your thoughts on that part of it.
Yeah. I mean, I can't disagree. You look at the second half of this game and it wasn't Ohio State, like essentially like kind of tossing it in the second half. But yeah. I think you saw Oregon figure some things out. At the same time, Ohio State knew they had a 34-8 lead and we're like, okay, we don't have to put Will Howard in any bad spots here, force anything downfield. We can kind of play this one a little bit safer. But they held you to 7 points in the second half. They adjusted to all the success that you had. Like you would have kept doing it. I know Ryan Day for a fact, if he has a chance to put up 100, he's putting up 100 right now because he's taking every shot he can. It's just they adjusted. So I definitely think there's something to that. I wanted to make sure I ate my words on the secondary the same way that I made you eat your words on the offensive line there, because I trashed the secondary. I've trashed Denzel Burke. I've trashed Davis and Igbinosun, and they played great. I also just think, to a degree, and we'll have time to talk about this in the offseason, like, you can't lose to Michigan 4 times in a row. I get it. This team has absolutely used that game as a learning experience and a launching pad.
Yeah.
Like, this team would not, if they would have even, I think, squeaked out a win against Michigan, it wouldn't have done the same thing. Like, eating that loss on the chin and going back to the drawing board and saying we need to reevaluate how we do things, because clearly the way that we're trying to play the game of football right now and the way we just try to play that game and what we consider the biggest game so far this season, like, it did something to this team. I don't know if it just lit a fire under them, but you can see in the way that they're playing, the entire beginning of the last 2 games has been, all right, drop back, put the ball in the air because that's where we're strong, right?
Yeah.
We'll let the passing game come, or the running game, come later. But let's just air this thing out and see what happens. And it's worked out well for them in both games, just like we've been saying. Like, it seems so obvious, but when you're on the inside of it, I feel like sometimes you need that sort of wake-up call of, it is as simple as we have really good wide receivers, we have a good quarterback that we're paying money to, just throw the football.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to see that from the inside. And I think they're using that Michigan game as like a launching pad now of, that's not going to work. Let's just lean into what we're really good at. And, they sort of forget about the traditional way of Ohio State football and how people want you to play and expect you to play, and how maybe even we want to run our offense. Let's forget about it. Just lean into what we're good at. And I think that's sort of what unlocked the next level for this offense.
This feels like the perfect segue into like the Ryan Day part of this conversation because Michigan is his bugaboo, as we know. And you bring that up, Jake. I think it's a well-founded point. And I actually had a conversation like this with John Sable of Fox 8 News, where he and I kind of talked about how we had heard there was a players only style meeting after that game, and actually. I think it was Davidson Igbinosun who, if you can find the clip on social media, he talked about it after the game. He said, like, yeah, all the leaders on the team, we got together, we had a meeting. And, they basically laid out like, the coaches and the game plan and all that stuff like that matters to an extent, but like, guys, it's on us. Like, we got to be the ones to make the plays. And they knew that they were kind of coming up short, especially in that Michigan game. And I like when you hear stuff like that, it's you can't possibly deny the fact that it had an impact on this team. Like that was a wake-up call that they absolutely needed. Like, I don't know that they'd be doing this if they had won that game, like you said, in any sort of style. Now, that doesn't excuse it, and that doesn't mean that you don't want to beat Michigan. But this is this run is changing the game. At least it should. And this is what you and I have talked about forever. Like we take calls at 92.3 of, Ohio State fans. Kirk Herbstreit would say it's people who are in the lunatic fringe, I guess. But it's the people who call in and say the only thing that matters is beating Michigan. And I've always pushed back on that a little bit because, listen, if you win a national championship, that is the ultimate prize. Everybody wants that. Like the only people that care about beating Michigan are you. Everybody else in college football wants that. They want a championship. And you look around the sport, like, is a year where Alabama loses to Auburn and goes and wins a national championship, like, is that tainted because they lost to Auburn? And I get, like, people say, no, Ohio State, Michigan's a bigger rivalry. Fine. You can have that. That's fine. But in no other level of sport and no other team in this sport do people put so much emphasis on the rivalry that it trumps almost or ruins a potential championship run. And I said, like, 2 years ago, I wish they would have pulled it off where they beat Georgia in that game and then won the title, because everybody would have had to cope with the fact that you lost to Michigan and you won a title. There's a chance they could do it this year, and it is going to have to change people's mindsets. I get why that game means so much. That shouldn't change. I'm not telling Ohio State fans. I was just the one caping for you guys saying Kirk Herbstreit's a moron because he shouldn't be calling these people lunatic fringe because they have expectations. Listen, you should still demand that you beat Michigan. That should still be something that Ryan Day has to do in a given season, or that you're holding him to that standard. I'm not saying that should change, but I think like how we view these things can change, and understanding that, like, yes, that's part of what you want him to do, but that if you go win a title, that is equally, if not more important than anything else that you can do during your season. I get that it's difficult. Change is hard. That game has had such a history of either costing a team a chance at a national championship or being like for the national championship in a lot of ways, because the winner of that team was going to go on and potentially get that honor. So I get the history there. I'm not trying to rewrite that and change it. But I think what does need to change is our mentality about that game. And you and I agree on that. Like, Nothing trumps a national championship. But I'm seeing people, and some of this is trolling, like Dave Portnoy of Barstool is out here like Ohio State fans acting like this run actually matters, but you lost to Michigan. Dude, does if Georgia wins the national championship this year, does their national championship run not matter because they lost to Alabama during the regular season and everyone's saying Alabama didn't get in the playoff and they should have? I don't think that's the case anymore because Michigan beat Bama, which, by the way, given how everybody talked about Bama for several weeks, is the Michigan loss now a quality loss because they also lost to Michigan? I'm just asking for a friend. So again, I'm not trying to sit here and defend Ryan Day and do all that, because he has to own the fact that he's lost that game 4 years in a row, and he'll get his chance, I guess, next year to try to see if he can pull it off. But right now, living in this moment, like, I'm done going back and being like, where was this game plan against Michigan? Yes, we can ask that question, but like, I'm looking ahead and saying, now it's here. Like, whatever happened in that Michigan game, it inspired whatever we're seeing right now. And I don't know if there's a team in college football who can stop it. Like, in a lot of ways, we kind of have Michigan to thank for that, because if they don't get beat by Michigan in that way, maybe this never happens and they lose to Tennessee and bow out in the first round. Like, who knows?
Yeah, like, again, if you find success in doing something that you're not good at, just because, like, you would have won on talent, right? If you would have beat Michigan, you won on talent. Just the fact that you have better players than Michigan has right now. That's not a great way to win. Like, it wouldn't have been the wake-up call. It would have been like, all right, hard-fought game. That's the way that, the game is. but we came out and won. Let's go back to trying to beat all the other teams the same way we've been doing it all year. Like, no, it was the wake-up call. And again, we agree, like, yeah, this game, the game means something. The rivalry means something. The tradition it's rooted in. Like, nobody's trying to change that. And nobody's telling you to, like, that this game doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And
no one's telling you not to care about the rivalry. Right.
Like, that game matters. Care about the rivalry. That should be, in the regular season, that should be the number one thing. You should still have the clock up on the wall. You should be caring about the game. It should be the thing that you prepare your entire regular season for. But, like, there's more beyond that, too. Right? Like, you have to focus on the fact that there are bigger things. Like, we'll go back to the fact that Ryan Day can't beat Michigan. He's in his own head. However you want to phrase it in the offseason. We'll do it, I'm sure, as all of next year comes up. Like, that conversation will remain. But in the meantime, there's other things to focus on. Like, there's bigger picture things. That was, like you said, in a lot of the ways, like, it meant so much because that was national championship. It solely rode on that game. If you lost to Michigan, you weren't playing for a national championship. It only happened one time where you actually lost to them and then still had a chance to further your season beyond a Big Ten championship or a college football playoffs, right? You had one chance, and it was the game against Georgia, which you almost actually got the opportunity to do. It was just like, it means a lot. It means so much, but like, look past it. I called Nick Saban an idiot, by the way, because he was on the Pat McAfee show, and I think a lot of Ohio State fans
Ohio State fans need therapy. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, but I think a lot of Ohio State fans have sort of put that game, I don't want to say behind them, but almost off to the side for now. Like, again,
well, I keep seeing a lot of them, though, asking, well, where was this during Michigan? And I get why that's the question you want to ask. But at this point, guys, like, we're 2 games into this playoff run where they're just dominating teams. Like, I don't need to keep asking that. Like, wherever it is, it's here now. All I care about is what's going to happen in the 2 games ahead or the next game, you know?
Yeah, where was this against Nebraska? The same question.
You can ask that question about a number of games. Like that. Where was this against Oregon the first time? Like, if they could do this against Oregon now, why didn't they do it against them in week 7?
Yeah, it's the same thing. Where was it all regular season? Like, it's how I opened my opening statements in this episode were, where was this all season? Like, yes, it's a question. I'm wondering where it was. But at the end of the day, like, if you go win a national championship, nobody cares what happened in week 9.
No.
Like, and when you struggled.
And that's my point on this. Like, if you're still asking that question, if you're watching this team each week at this point, like 2 rounds into the playoff, and if we see it again next week and people are out here tweeting like, again, where was this against Michigan? I think you're still that is a testament to this fan base's mentality still being solely wrapped up in the Michigan game. And again, I get it. I get the history there. I get why that's the case. We have to work on changing our mindset. And if they go win the national championship, Jake, I think it's going to be the biggest step towards actually changing that mindset. It's a different era. This is the NIL era. You can 12 teams make the playoff now. And I get like there's controversy there because people are like, well, you're giving teams that maybe don't deserve it a second chance. I think one of the most dangerous things we can do is call it like a mulligan when a team like Ohio State, who loses maybe 2 games and you feel like isn't deserving to be in, gets a chance to get into the playoff and make a run. Because guys, like, we don't say this in any other sport that you get a mulligan because I've always said the margin for error in college football shouldn't be 100% zero. Because if that's the case, your national championship was what this year? Oregon. Like, if you're going back to like the BCS era, your national championship would have been what? Oregon, and I guess they would have put Georgia in because Georgia won the SEC, and you would have left out some other teams that I think, like Texas, I think would has a puncher's chance. They're in the semifinal. Penn State clearly has a puncher's chance. They're in the semifinal. I think Notre Dame has a chance to beat Georgia. But did Notre Dame not deserve a chance to compete for a national championship just because they lost to, just because they, like, I think we get too wrapped up in, as college football fans, this idea of like perfection. Like, in no other sport do we get, this is the only sport where like we, the fans, feel like we get to decide who the best teams are. Every other sport, it's played out on the field or on the playing surface, and that's that, right? In this sport, we feel like we get to control and we have power in deciding who are the best teams in the country. And I think that's why we're having such a hard time like accepting the 12-team playoff, because we don't like that the teams get to play it out on the field. We like just pointing and saying, well, that team played in the SEC, so they're good. And that team has 2 losses, so they can't be any good. And that's no other sport is that how it works. So the biggest threat to like this era in college football is calling it a mulligan, in my opinion, when you're like, well, a team like Ohio State didn't deserve to get in because they had 2 losses and they weren't like perfect and they didn't go out and like they didn't earn it or something like that. Like, you can't tell me they didn't earn it. I get the Michigan loss was devastating, but like, there's different ways to earn it. There's different ways to get in there. And I get that there's flaws with the field right now. They have to tweak this thing because I'm sorry, Oregon, and really, we said that Oregon got sort of the short end of the stick, and they did, but that also was impacted simply by, like, if Ohio State beats Michigan, that matchup doesn't even happen in the quarterfinals. So That's the thing. Like, by Ohio State screwing itself by getting like a tougher path on their own, they also kind of screwed Oregon into getting the tougher matchup in round 2. But yeah, like I can't call it a mulligan because this is what we wanted. This is how it should be. You shouldn't just be completely out of the national championship conversation because you lose a game to one bad. I mean, Ohio State got a second chance the first year of the 14 playoff, and they made it count. Like, you're going to tell me they weren't deserving of that shot because they won a national championship? Like, I just can't go there. So I hate the term mulligan of being like, well, Ohio State got a mulligan in this 12-team era. So what? Like, just because you want to dictate who the best teams are by pointing and saying, well, they did this and they did that. Like, no, this is the era we're living in. And this is like any other sport, a chance to prove it on the field. That's always been the most important thing to me, is let them prove it on the field. Whether or not they let too many of the small upstart teams in, the non-power 5s in, and those games are blowouts, at least we're getting a chance to prove it on the field, because there's no more disputing if a UCF goes undefeated, being like, well, hey, what if they got in? Like, no, now we have an answer. We know they didn't belong. We know that a team like SMU didn't belong in the tournament with Penn State, but they got a chance to prove it and they blew it. But like, we also now know Alabama probably didn't deserve that shot because they lost another game this year. They had 4 losses. To me, like, 4 losses is when it's like, okay, you don't get a mulligan there. But for Ohio State to have 2 losses, and I think throughout the year prove they were one of the best teams in the country, like, it's okay. And they got the harder path. They had to play Tennessee, now Oregon, now they got to play Texas just to even get to the national championship game. They didn't play any easy cakewalk games.
No, it's been an incredibly tough schedule. I think the way that it's set up right now is it's in a good spot. Like, yes, people want to decide who the good teams are. Don't really get to, right? Like, you get 12 teams. If your biggest argument is that 3-loss Alabama should have been in, we're making the wrong arguments, okay? Like, 3-loss Alabama would have been done 6 weeks ago if we were in the BCS or the 14 playoff.
I think, Jake, like, the bigger thing is, it's not people necessarily arguing for Bama anymore. It's more so just people being like, well, in the old format, Ohio State would have never had a chance, so good for them for getting a mulligan. And I just hate the word mulligan in this instance. Like, no, it's the way it's set up now. It's not like, yes, you're right. Like, in some ways they get a mulligan, but like in every other sport, there's teams that lose several games or whatever, or lose a costly game, and they still get a chance. Like, do we complain when I mean, I guess some people probably complain when, like, the NFL, like when back in the day when like an 8-9 team would like make the playoffs or something like that, and you'd be like, well, what the hell is this? You know, or I guess 8-9 would be now, but like when like an 8-8 team would make the playoffs, and you'd be like, why? Like, this isn't fair. But then they'd go on to win. Like the Giants, for example, the year they beat the Patriots, were like under 500, I think, when they made it. And it's like, well, how does like the division sort of set up sort of is stupid? But like, they still went and proved it. They still had to go prove it. They had a harder road than anybody else. So it's we love that about every other sport except this one. And this one, we demand perfection, and it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, I just don't like using the word mulligan for it, because it doesn't feel like that to me. It feels like Ohio State earned their spot, even though they lost to Michigan. Like, that doesn't just exempt you from having a chance to win a national championship. And we're finding that out about this format. And now they're going out and proving that they are the best damn team in the country.
Yeah, listen, like, nobody's going to complain when Kentucky at the end of the year for basketball is going to be like a top 4 or 5 seed, right? They lost to Ohio State. I guess you're just giving them a mulligan, easy road for them, right? Like, nobody's complaining about that. It's.
And I get basketball is different because you have a lot more games and all that, but still, right. Like, your point is valid. Like,
yeah, it's the exact same thing though. It's like you can lose to bad teams, and not saying Ohio State basketball is a bad team. They're like, but they're disappointing.
Yeah,
right. It's not one that you're happy about. Like if you're Kentucky, it's the same way. If you lose to Michigan or Ohio State, like based on just the fact that you are a better football team, you don't love that. As long as you don't go out and lose 3 or 4 of those games, though, you're going to be perfectly fine. All you have to do is get in and then like be playing your best football at the end of the year, which is what Ohio State's showing, is that college football has changed. It is no longer the era of being perfect and needing perfection. It is, let's make sure we're progressing and taking care of most of these teams. And if we lost to a bad team along the way, or we lost to a couple of good teams along the way, that's okay. Well, we're going to have to pay for that, right? You'll have the harder road, as you were saying, but we'll at least have the chance. If we're playing our football, it doesn't matter, because the same way that for Ohio State, now they have to go through the likes of who they just went through, Tennessee, Oregon, Texas, and whoever comes out of the other side of the bracket to win a national championship. Like, the same rules apply for Oregon. Oregon got quote unquote screwed. Guess what? If you want to win a national championship, you got to beat every team. You have to be able to be better than every team and feel confident.
And I thought Dan Lanning, he sort of downplayed that narrative the whole week. Like he was very much like, hey, you got to play who you got to play. You know, we're not making excuses about, and he said that last night too, like we're not making excuses about who we had to play when. I think he kind of also assumed like at some point they were probably going to see Ohio State. So, you know, they just had to make sure when they they were ready, and they weren't ready for this game, obviously last night. But yeah, like everyone who's like, well, the Michigan game doesn't matter now and whatever. I guess to an extent that's kind of true, because it doesn't carry the weight that maybe it used to in terms of like knocking a team out of the championship conversation. But I think those Ohio State players who had that team meeting would tell you it meant a lot to them. And that's the thing. It's what you make it. If the players still care about that game and they still make it a thing that matters, it still matters to the program, to the fans, to everybody. And clearly, if this is like the spark and the catalyst for them winning a title, it mattered. It mattered enough that they were like, we got to really look in the mirror and change some things here. And if it results in a championship run, like clearly it was still something that mattered to them. So I don't know. I get it's a different era. I get it's hard to change, but like I hate using the term mulligan because a team wasn't perfect. Like, they didn't earn it because they weren't undefeated and, you know, win all their games by 50 gajillion points. And like, I know we liked that about the old era. I know we liked that the regular season felt like they carried so much weight, but I also hated every year where it was like, yeah, Ohio State has a few missteps. And you know, another thing Dan Lanning summed up pretty well last night. He said, some days it's just not your day. Said today wasn't our day against them. And he referenced their loss to Michigan and said they didn't have it wasn't their day against Michigan a couple weeks ago. I think that's very true. Like, to ask college kids especially to be like perfect. And I get that maybe that's the beauty of it, was like, oh, Nick Saban always did it. He always pulled it off. Nick Saban's the best to ever do it. But like, I always felt like there should have been a little bit more room for a margin of error with these teams. And now we have that. To me, it's a beautiful thing. I hate that we're trying to turn this into like, well, they didn't deserve to be in the field because they lost to Michigan and they lost 2 games and blah, blah, blah. And like, let's just go back to the old ways of doing things. Like, no, they are proving to you that the old system was flawed, because sometimes teams that have a couple losses still have as good of a shot as anybody to win a title. And I think that opens up to bring us back to the Ryan Day thing, because we didn't actually get into like his job status.
Right.
But Jake, to me, I know that we were some of the more adamant people as well, saying it's a national championship or bust or they fire him. I think we can comfortably say his job has been saved after yesterday's win. I don't think he's going anywhere.
Yeah, you can't, right? Like, even if you manage to lose a game against Texas.
I think Anthony Lima said he's already talking about an extension for Ryan Day.
Oh my God. I don't know if I'm going there, but like, you can't fire him. That's not an option. No. After watching what he just did against 2 of the top teams in the country and dismantling them.
I guess Mike Vrabel can stop waiting by the phone.
Yeah, he can start taking those calls from the Bears and the Jets now. Go ahead. Go, whoever wants you from the NFL, you can talk to him now. Yeah, like, it's tough because it does still feel like if you were to lose to Texas, you fell short of all 3 of your goals this year.
Yeah.
But like, you can't just throw out the window that he absolutely, again, dismantled an Oregon team who was undefeated this year with some really quality wins, including like yourself, and he made them look like, basically a cupcake game. Like, well, the first half of Akron was closer than the first half against Oregon by a significant margin.
Yeah. Well, and the narrative that he can't win big games, I think is gone to the wayside. It's
Spencer,
pretty.
just
It's
beat an undefeated Oregon team
right.
in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl.
Well, and
to
he
advance to
beat
the college football
Tennessee,
semifinal.
an SEC team like that. Anytime you beat an SEC team, it's going to be held in higher esteem because everyone thinks the SEC is the
Hold
greatest
on,
thing
wait.
since sliced bread.
Victory lap, please. Bowl games for the SEC. Ohio State beats Tennessee. Navy beats Oklahoma. What do we have here? USC beats Texas A&M. Michigan beats Alabama. Illinois beats South Carolina.
I think the SEC is 1-4 against the Big Ten, and 1-4 against the Big Ten in bowl games right now. I think, and we'll have it. We'll get to see what happens. Texas and Ohio State is another one, and we could get Penn State and Georgia, which would give you another chance. Like this could come down to like the two SEC teams versus two Big Ten teams to really see who's like people just need to admit the SEC was mid this year. That's the biggest thing, but that's another conversation. I don't know. I just like. He's now proving to you he can win the big games. And for that reason, again, I'm not jumping and saying, give an extension or anything, but like the guy had to step up security at his house after the Michigan game because of like threats and just things that people were saying. And he's gone out now and like quieted the masses. You're right. Like if you come up short and you lose to Texas, no one's going to be satisfied with that. And it'll still be disappointing. But I think the conversations about his job now are officially over. I want to throw this up here real quick because Ari Wasserman, who used to cover the Buckeyes, now is like a more national college reporter. I follow Ari's work. He does a great job. He tweeted this yesterday after the game. You really want to know why people get so mad at Ryan Day? Because with the way this team is constructed, everyone knew this Ohio State team was in there somewhere. Nobody could understand what took so long for it to show up. It's really that simple. And we talked about that a little bit earlier in the show. That is the most perplexing question is where was this earlier in the season? And listen, and Ari actually wrote a great piece after the Michigan loss about how Ryan Day has there's a Michigan problem with him. We talked about it. They're in his head. That team is in his head. But he has proven to you that, on some level, if it's anybody but Michigan, he is going to he has as good of a chance as anybody with his team and his talent to win that game. And he's proven it right now on the biggest stage. And if they go win a title because of it, it doesn't exonerate him from the Michigan thing. We still have to figure out why that's a problem for him. And maybe like ultimately too, like maybe if he pulls this off and wins a title, it's the best possible thing to happen to him because maybe it puts his mind at ease where he can be like, I've gone out and now proven it at this level that I am one of the best coaches in this sport, one of the best recruiters in this sport, and that we can go win a national championship when I'm in charge. Maybe that eases his mind enough where he can finally go into that Michigan game with like a clear head and just be like, let's just go play football. And maybe things will change. So again, he has that problem. And that's why to Ari's point, that is why we're all very perplexed and annoyed with Ryan Day and why we were all calling for his job as recently as 3 weeks ago. But he is getting vindication for himself with what this team is doing right now in the college football playoff and proving that the Michigan game might still be a problem, but he is proving that the other best teams in the country, he is as good as anybody in terms of getting his team ready for those games and winning those games, and all those narratives about how he can't win the big one and all that are going to the wayside.
Yeah, so the big thing was always, for me at least, like, does he have a Michigan problem or does he have a can't get my team to play in the big moments problem? Right? Because I think that was the question. He had never really had his team perform and come out on top in games that really mattered.
Fell short against Georgia, fell short against Oregon, obviously earlier this season. Yeah, you're right.
Like even though he was playing close games, it's not like he was getting outcoached by miles and miles. It was like you just couldn't win the game. And at the end of the day, like the only thing that actually matters is whether or not it's a W or an L in the column at the end of the day, right?
Well, and that's why my opinion started to waver this year because I was like, you lost the Oregon game. At some point, you got to win these games. Now he's doing it.
Yeah, like he's clearly shown that, yes, it's a Michigan problem. He does have that. We are going to have to find a way to address that and get it changed because I don't think you can just sit around at Ohio State and continue to lose to Michigan, even if you're walking around winning national titles. Like, that's great. That's the goal. That's what we're getting to. You also just can't lose to Michigan every year. Like, we need to figure that problem out. When they're worst team, you have to be able to beat them. But he's proving that's the problem. It is Michigan that's the problem, not the big moments in the big games. Because in the two biggest moments that he possibly could have imagined this year in a new playoff format, His team smoked the competition in back-to-back instances.
Yeah, and if he beats another SEC team, I mean, everyone's going to lose their collective minds because you beat the SEC, you have to be good. I mean, that's what I've learned about the way that people view the SEC. I wish Bama would have been on the schedule this year. Ohio State could have beat them, and then they'll be on the schedule, I think, coming up in like 2026 or something, 2027, something like that. I don't know. But anyway, guys, we went a lot longer than I sort of thought we would, but there was a lot to unpack here, a lot to dissect here. There's certainly some good commentary on this as well. Steve Royer, and this is maybe a good place to leave the show because we are going to obviously preview Texas coming up next week. At the day, I hope there's no more talk about how they are so good and will beat Texas. It's never a good thing to inflate your team. Take it seriously. Don't let off the gas. So I think along those lines, it's one thing for fans to do that. I think it's about like the next test for Ryan Day now, Jake, is like, okay, you've smoked two teams to start this playoff. Are you going to let it go to your head? And I think he kind of talked after the game, like we were going to stay. We would stay the night after and like celebrate this, but he was like, we're actually flying out tonight and going back to Columbus. I think that already sort of gave me a signal that they're taking this very seriously. Like they're on to the next game. They're like, no, there's no we'll celebrate right after the game, get the trophy, but we're heading home and it's about our business. Like we have another game to prepare for now. And so that's the next test is can he keep them sort of level-headed here, preparing the right way, getting ready for some massive games against other good teams, including Texas, who's up next. And then we'll kind of see what plays out from there. But we will have plenty of time in the next week plus to preview this matchup with Texas. There's going to be a lot to get to there. And Jake and I will certainly break it all down for you. As always, I want to implore you to like, follow, subscribe, and review the Sons of the Shoe podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, the Odyssey app that I mentioned, Apple, and of course the 92 Through the Fan YouTube channel where you can comment, as many of you already have, and where most of you already are watching this video in real time. Appreciate your support as always. I can say, Jake, I am thrilled that we continue to have Ohio State football to talk about. I was a little nervous that this was going to be our last show for a while, or at least in terms of like talking about games. But I'm glad that we actually have meaningful games to still talk about.
Yeah, it'll be good to celebrate a national championship at the end, right?
Oh, man. Jake is calling his shot. Jake is calling his shot for the show. If they lose, Jake, to Texas, we are going to eat crow for that. So thank you.
Let's plant the flag. National champions.
We'll go viral at least. I guess that's the important thing.
Well, I'll plant the flag. Listen, Texas almost lost to Arizona State, okay? Cam Scattaboo almost just ran over them while he was puking on the sideline. Okay,
dude, that guy has Cleveland Brown written all over him.
Cam Scattaboo?
Yeah.
Yeah, he kind of does. I don't know how I feel
just
about
like
that.
He's like Peyton Hill is 2.0. That's what that feels like right there.
He's gonna have one really good year. That's
somebody's gonna draft him, and it's I don't know. It's gonna be crazy.
But like, by the way, like Texas should have lost that game.
Yeah,
they sent really a zero. They sent a zero blitz on 4th and 13.
Yeah, that was Greg Williams running their defense. Like, what the hell was that? That was the dumbest. I literally was watching that game. I was like, dude, they're gonna lose 4th and 13, and then all of a sudden Quinn Ewers put a rabbit out of a hat. I was like, what the hell were they doing? Sending a zero blitz, like just drop into coverage. Don't let them get the first down.
Right, like
doing.
They're allowed to get a catch, okay? He also doesn't have to wind up and throw it 60 yards. That like you send a zero blitz when you have to let the play develop. Guys, they're 20 yards down the field. This is like a 3-second route. That's not how this works.
Yeah, that was bad.
But no, that was bad, and the whole other side of the bracket's a fucking joke. So
it's serious when Jake drops an F-bomb. Here's what I'll say. I think after that game, I have a hard time believing anyone's going to beat Ohio State. Like, they are clearly the best team left in the field. And I said it going into it, like, if they win that game and if they do it the way they did, I don't know who's stopping them. So I tend to lean in your direction of thinking that game, we talked about that game being for the national championship. I don't think anybody.
In my direction, Spencer. Walk into it.
Plant
the flag.
No, run into it.
Run.
I don't think anybody's going to beat them, but I am a little bit nervous about Texas because their defense is very, very good. And if they can sort of equalize and slow them down a little bit, Quinn Ewers has been inconsistent, but he can also make some plays. So I'm a little bit nervous. But anyway, we'll talk about the game more. Maybe I'll finally plant the flag officially. And we'll be back with plenty more coverage of your Ohio State Buckeyes For Jake Vulinec, I'm Spencer German. As always, go Bucks.
Go Bucks.
Yes, there is. Look. See, there's water. Want to go use it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I forgot.